As AI capabilities expand, traditional notions of expertise and competitive advantage are being redefined. Bobby Yerramilli-Rao, the Chief Strategy Officer at Microsoft, joins Professor Karim Lakhani to explore how AI is reshaping corporate strategy.
Okay, where are you sitting? Where are you going? Oh, the clicker, yes, absolutely. So it's not true that all South Asians in AI should be bald, but it's true. It's an empirical fact.
I think the best ones are.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, we're on. Let me ask a question. Well, first of all, I just want to make the observation that you just had lunch. So all the blood flow in your body is going to your stomach instead of your brain. We might have some lunch lag. So our job is to keep this conversation very interesting. But just be aware of that. So if you feel yourself dozing, like get up, do some jumping jacks, and then we won't mind as part of this thing. Okay, so I'll ask a question. How many of you think that you are experts in your field? Raise your hand. Actually, stand up, because then we stand up, yeah, so that we really see. Like you're like a true expert in your field. Just stand up. Stand up. Stand up if you think you're a true expert in your field. You're true in your job, what you do, you're a true expert. Okay, all right. So about half. About half. All right. So Bobby and I, with two other colleagues from Microsoft, have a paper that is coming out in March and April issue of the Harvard Business Review, where we have some bad news for you.
Yeah. Actually, the bad news is already out because the article is actually
The article is
online.
already out. Pull the mic close to you.
Yeah, so can you hear me? Yeah. The article is already out actually online, so the bad news is already out. The bad news is that the expertise that you have is going to become a lot more available to a lot of other people. So all of you who are not yet expert, the people who didn't stand up,
About half the room.
you're going to benefit because now you can become as expert as all your friends who stood up. So I've got some other bad news, and that's for Karim. So how many of you were at Harvard Business School? And how many of you were tortured by this guy being cold called? So now I'm going to flip the script on him. I'm going to be the person giving the lecture, and I'm going to cold call him.
Yes, yes.
So let's see
We'll
how
see
you
how
do,
well I
Karim.
do.
Let's see how you do.
You'll grade me, yes, exactly.
Yeah, you can grade him at the end of this, okay? All right, so today we're going to talk about expertise and how AI is changing the shape of it. So I think I'm going to read this from behind, but
You can see it up there, too.
oh, that's a good idea. If I could see it, yeah. So the main point is that we at Microsoft look at how AI is going to transform not just businesses, but the world as a whole. But I think one thing we can be sure about is that AI is going to transform every business process in every industry. And when you look at what that really means, that means that actually things that you require expertise to be able to accomplish can now be done with the aid of AI. And expertise is a very important area because it defines, or has defined, in fact, the eras of industry formation. So all the way back to when there was a baker, there was a blacksmith, there was a farmer, that formed companies of a certain size. Then you had the Industrial Revolution, which formed companies of a different size. Then you had the IT revolution, companies got to become bigger, all because expertise just became more available. And so you could organize around it. So now when expertise becomes fully abundant, what does that mean for companies? And how can companies think about what they should be doing? And what I'd say is that for companies, it actually impacts all three areas: operations, organization, and strategy. And Karim, typically, which order is this done normally in companies?
The other way around. So
Yeah,
typically
correct.
we start, and of course, I'm in the technology and operations management group. So historically, we used to be in the basement of the Morgan Hall. until very recently. And so we were the low status people. So strategy was the queen, right? Was the king. Then you have OB in organizations. My boss, Sadal, she'd be in the middle, and then operations were lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now this is flipped.
It's flipped. And the script is flipped because when you think about AI and the impact that it has, the first place it has impact is in operations. And so I'm going to give an example here of something that we have as a product, and a lot of people have products which are AI for coding. And coding is an expert task. You have to go to a good school to do computer science. You have to spend a lot of time understanding programming languages. You understand how to do configurations and environments. It's a very high paid job. And now when you look at all the different steps of what someone has to do in coding and how it's done, how it used to be done, which is the top line, and how it now is done, where interstitially within the task, people are able to offload to AI. What that has, it has dramatic impact in terms of productivity. So these are the sorts of productivity gains that we're seeing inside of Microsoft, inside of all our customers. It's transformational. And we're getting to the point now where you can't even hire programmers without them asking if you have these tools.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think one thing that we should just keep in mind is these numbers are kind of stunning, like 55%, 60%. Again, in normal economic processes, in normal economic growth settings, you don't get these performance numbers. Like these are unheard of. And so, when we've done our own studies in other settings, again, we keep seeing 40%, 50%, 60%, and that just seems unreal. And so I think that you should just calibrate this as well to say these numbers are stunning. And so, just a few years ago, there weren't enough software developers, right?
That's right.
There weren't enough software developers.
We still are short.
Yeah.
A huge number. I mean, even a country like Japan is short 1 million software developers.
Yeah. But now all of a sudden, with these stunning numbers, you could imagine, what can now be accomplished.
And people always talk about the famous elephant in the room of job displacement. And I think we have to be honest about the fact that there are certain jobs which are going to be displaced. But when we think about something like this, where we have enormous amounts of productivity in a job which is a hard-to-get job, of which there are not enough people in the world, the question I would ask you is, if you're running a large software development organization and you suddenly have an extra day a week for everyone in the organization, are you going to then tell 20% of the people who took a long time to recruit that actually I don't need you anymore, go and work for somebody else? Or are you going to say, actually, there's a whole long list of things I'd love for you to do instead that we couldn't get to before, now let's work on those things? So I think in operations we're seeing enormous benefits, and we're seeing it not just in coding, we're seeing it in a whole range of areas. And you won't be able to read this, but these are some typical functions in a company. And here are a list of the sorts of tasks in those functions where we're seeing people using AI today in a way that actually can be beneficial. So the scope is gigantic, and that's why we're seeing people starting with operations today. But the impact of AI and the democratization of expertise and the abundance of expertise also has an impact also on how you organize. And so here's an important finding, which maybe you can speak to, Karim, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So just imagine, like on the x-axis, sort of a normal distribution of expertise, right? And the question that we've been asking ourselves at the Institute has been what happens when everybody across the normal distribution of expertise gets these AI tools and become available to them. Now remember, the way to think about this normal distribution is, and this is a fun joke you can ask, whenever you meet a doctor, you should ask out of 100 doctors in your graduating class, what rank were you? Okay? Because what right, is that amongst 100 doctors, the 100th person, the 100th doctor, the worst performing is also called a doctor, right? As much as the best performing is, right? So you imagine a normal distribution of expertise. And what we see is that once this AI capabilities become available, and that this capability is as good potentially as where the humans are at, then all of a sudden those that were behind the average, those that were below average, all of a sudden now can be at the average. And if the average of the AI is better than the humans, then they'll be at wherever the average of the AI is at. And so we're observing in a range of studies this left tail cutoff, where basically those below average get a massive boost. And a big question that we keep asking ourselves is, how will the best experts use these AI to actually further the distribution to the right? And that's what we expect to see happening around expertise.
So when you think about expertise and AI, obviously the first thing we talked about is productivity, which is what everyone's talking about, and that's where the real benefit is today. But it gets more interesting when you think about actually how you organize a company when you have everybody could become a reasonably competent expert. How do you organize those people? How do you recruit those people? What are you actually solving for when you're recruiting them and who you're looking for? How do you develop them? You can also think about it a little bit beyond that. So if you look on the left-hand side here, this is a current team. There's a manager. There's a group of people reporting to that manager. They get some work done. But over time, each person can manage a raft of agents, AI agents, to do things for them. So now every person is effectively a team. And I know, Karim, you've done some work on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're clearly seeing that you can now start to build cross-functional expertise through these agents and get access to skills that you may not have. So imagine you're in marketing, you need to collaborate with somebody in R&D, the R&D person isn't available. Now you can rely on these agents to help you with that as well, and vice versa. And we're seeing this over and over again in a range of so-called expertise across the board in the economy.
So the question now becomes, what does the shape of a company even look like, or an organization look like? When you have every individual that's there is now at least an average expert, if not a very good expert, and every person that you're recruiting has got a team that they bring with them of expert agents. So now, what kind of people you need? How do you organize yourselves? How do you set objectives for people even? And what is it that the people are going to do? And I think it's going to be around collaboration, it's going to be around communication, it's going to be around setting actual objectives and making sure that there are ethical boundaries. But people can become a whole lot more productive. So there's productivity within a process, then there's productivity actually of the team itself.
Bobby, if you could stay for a second on this. You had said something provocative at our advisory council meeting, a couple of weeks ago, which was that you imagine a future where employees will come with their own agents.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
I think that we're seeing it happening already. And so if you imagine people are using ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, whatever they're using on a daily basis, what you're now starting to see is that we're introducing memory into those agents. So that means that over time, the conversations you have, the chat that you have, is recalled and stored by the agent so that they can be more effective in helping you. That memory builds up over time, and the agent becomes more expert and useful to you over time. You are therefore more productive because of that agent. Now, when you go to work, you'd want to have that agent with you, because otherwise you're coming as a less capable employee. So companies have to work out how do they allow employees to bring their agent to work in a way that's compliant with their own governance and data and privacy restrictions, but not losing the benefit of having an employee coming with their own enhanced capabilities.
Yeah, in fact, Bobby's recommendation to our dean was that we should build the HBS agent that is available to be portable with you to go along, so that it joins you in the journey of learning on campus or online. And then as you have your career, this agent keeps getting smarter and smarter based on the knowledge we're producing, but that agent then interfaces with the infrastructure inside of a company. I was talking to a large CPG company, and they were like, or data. So anyway, there's going to be lots of issues to be resolved there around this, but I think this world is happening now.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to use the agent for all sorts of things, but I can totally imagine, as I was mentioning to the dean at Harvard Business School, I can totally imagine that people would want to consult that agent occasionally for advice around what I should do in a certain situation in a business scenario. And I imagine maybe many people in the room also would be availing of that if it were available. So we've got productivity in business processes. We've got individual productivity and team productivity impacting how you think about operations. Now let's think about strategy. And when you think about strategy, strategy is about allocation of resource. It's about setting objectives and then allocation of resource. And the resource allocation is also going to change because of the availability of expertise. If you think about it, right now, in some cases, people try to avoid it, but there's a little bit of peanut buttering across all different activities in a company. People try to put more into the core activities, into the activities that differentiate them really. But with this availability of expertise now becoming much more abundant, you can really take that to the maximum. And you can have, for example, a real segregation of activities that are necessary to keep the lights on and those which actually differentiate you and cause you to create value. And I think there's a great example, actually, the most extreme example that I heard of recently was the one that you're familiar with, Karim, which is a company called Focus Fuel, and you'll describe that in a second, but on this page, we're just describing what this company, and you'll hear about what the company is. The company is not a very big company in terms of the number of people, but it's had an amazing impact. How they were able to focus in on just the tiny sliver of activities that matter for them to be able to make money, and everything else is done by other people, or in fact, done by AI.
Yeah, so again, if you look up thefocusfuel.com, this is a company that creates caffeinated, so I think we all need it right now. In fact, there's some in my bag. I'll go get it. Caffeinated gummy bears. And they're like healthy for you as well. So there's some nootropics in there and so on and so forth. And it's three friends who were ex-gamers who wanted to sort of think about how to be in business. And they said, you know, caffeine is important for most knowledge workers. And so let's imagine ourselves trying to create a caffeinated product. But the entire creative process of market identification, of product identification, market segmentation, recipe development, recipe scale-up, finding the suppliers, supply chain execution, branding, marketing, all of that was done through them using GPTs. And there's 3 people working part-time with no products available, no expertise in CPG, in consumer packaged goods. They're now on the Amazon Launchpad program. They're making millions of dollars in revenue, all while only working at this part-time. And so this is, you know, the black swan kind of a thing where typically you say, well, you need experience and expertise to do well in an industry. Here these guys just pop in and figure a thing out using AI tools to give them all the expertise they need and go to market.
So this idea that people who are not experts can enter into a new field and using AI can leverage resources that otherwise would require a lot of funding and a large team to be successful is going to be applied across every industry and even inside big companies. I think you run programs which actually demonstrate how people can develop new products very, very quickly using AI, in fact, even in like 90 minutes or something, which is extraordinary for a product development process. And so this kind of leads us to the following conclusion, which is that everybody here is used to competing with your competitor. There's you, and then there's a competitor. And you know, you kind of move up, and then the competitor moves up, and then you move up, and the competitor moves up. Now we're entering an era where actually you with AI are going to beat the competitor which doesn't have AI. But the thing that you have to stay ahead of is AI. Because whatever you're good at, to Karim's earlier point, at some point, the AI might become just as good as you. And so if you have a set of things that you do as a company which are differentiating for you, where you're going to really be able to create value because customers are willing to pay for that because it's scarce and hard to get unless they come to you. And you find that actually, over time, AI becomes more and more capable, and customers can just say, well, I can get that from AI, or I can get that from 2 kids in a garage with AI. You have to think about, well, what am I doing? What am I doing to actually improve myself? And I think the imperative here is that everyone has to get very, very clear about what it is that they're doing to add value, and then use AI to enhance that capability, while AI is also eroding other parts of what you do.
Yeah. And my advice actually to many C-suite executives has been very clear. Like, actually go through the exercise of identifying what your core expertise is inside of your firm, or are. Like, actually do that exercise. Like, be systematic and say, we have expertise in being able to do marketing campaigns or come up with formulations or this or that. So make a list and try to be as exhaustive as possible about your expertise. Then what I would do is I would stand up a little test suite of saying, given this expertise that I think I have, where are the LLMs on that, right? Are they below us? Are they ahead of us? And then make decisions that way. Because you can actually be very empirical about this and actually force yourself to run the thought experiments to say, every new version of all the tools that are becoming available, where do I stack up? Because then you'll have a radar available to you to say, hey, this is where today's Copilot is at, this is where the Gemini model is at, this is where Llama is at, right? And we better figure out how we're continuing to add our own expertise.
Yeah, I think your friend Ethan Mollick actually posted something very similar to that recently, saying every company should take these models and try it out in their own scenarios, because we can benchmark the models on generic things, but in your own company, it may be that the AI does everything that you can do really well, and maybe in what you're doing, it actually doesn't do very well, and it gives you a good litmus test. So I think there are 3 questions to ask. The first is, what's this say? Yep. So the first is, what part of what you do can customers get from AI? Which is an uncomfortable question to ask, but you have to assume that customers are going to do it if you don't do it.
Oh yeah, they don't care about you.
The second thing to ask is, what are you uniquely good at? And it's very important to understand that and be quite crystal clear.
Yeah, don't buy your own marketing on that.
Because, you have to know what you really are good at, not what you think you're good at. And then the last is, what new things can I do now that I have AI? So things which previously I would like to have done, but I didn't have the expertise, or I couldn't afford the expertise, or it was just too costly for, or unattainable in other ways. Maybe now that's becoming possible. And I think that over time, what people will end up doing is migrating up from things that they were doing for which they could earn money to things which are new things where they're going to be able to earn money.
Yeah, and we're seeing early shoots of this. So later on, Vladimir Simovich will talk about what's happening in the auto industry in this space, and you'll see dramatic reductions in time for car design, for example, and that becoming a competitive advantage for you. But not only do you need to now reduce the time to design the car, but also be flexible in your factories, right? Be flexible in your go-to-market and so forth. So that's going to be part of the stack you need to think about. We've seen dramatic reductions, in marketing times. A recent study out of the lab at MIT has shown that scientists with AI can now discover new materials that were simply not possible before. And so you can now have these new capabilities, and the question becomes, what do you now do with these capabilities, and how does it impact you across the board, right? Because it's not enough to just become 40% more efficient or productive in programming. You need to think about the entire software lifecycle, and that's going to be a big challenge.
Absolutely. So we often get asked, what should we do to get going? And sometimes people are overwhelmed, and this becomes a little bit too much. And the answer is just start with something very simple. Pick a business process that you know AI will work in already. Get going with that. By doing that, you're going to get a lot of learning around what you should do next. Make sure you allocate the right amount of budget for it, and the budget shouldn't be just the CIO's problem. This is actually core to the company. And so actually just getting started with something is the most important thing. But the success studies, the successful companies that we've seen, and we see a lot of companies around the world, they all have one thing in common. The direction and the impetus comes from the top. It has to come from the top. There has to be that drive. And I think that even in the UAE, we've seen how many times the leadership here has been credited with providing the vision and the impetus and the drive. I think we see it here, we see it in every company that is a successful company. So if you start from the top, pick something simple, you can actually start this journey.
Bobby, can you make that budget point again? Because I think it's important, because you see this across the board, across all your clients. Because I think that's where there's a lot of disputes and fights and misallocation.
So the CIO's budget is never going up. It's always kept constant or tries to go lower each year. And I don't think that AI is going to suddenly be able to shoehorn itself into the CIO's budget very easily. The CIOs play an important role, but they're not going to be given more budget. But if what you're doing is you're saving a bunch of marketing dollars, you're saving a bunch of dollars in your software development, you're saving a bunch of dollars in your legal department, then who should be paying for that? It should be paid for by the line of business or by the function. And I think having the clarity around that is very important at budget setting time. How much money am I going to give to this function for people? How much money am I going to give to this department for actually buying GPUs and AI? Because that will be the most productive and efficient frontier of cost. So I think that's the message. I want to end with one thing, actually, Karim, which is that, and we might actually end on time,
Yes.
which is great.
25 minutes.
Exactly. So I want to just end with one thing, which is I normally start a talk that I give around how humanity has progressed over the last 1,000 years, but maybe I'll end with that right now. And I'm just going to say, imagine on a regular evening, you will do the following. You'll get into a car, you go to a restaurant and eat food from a different cuisine, and then you go to a movie theater and you see something with great special effects and audio, and then on the car ride home, you might actually call one of your friends who lives in a different country. You go home, if you've got a headache, you take a pill and drink water out of your tap, and then you sleep in a room which is temperature controlled. None of those things would have been available to even a king or a queen 150 years ago. Even the most wealthy and powerful person 150 years ago could not do a single one of those things. And so when you think about what's going to happen in the next 20 years and the next 100 years, the difference in living standards and quality of life, which I thought His Excellency said really brilliantly in your session earlier today, if you think about how the human approach, it's in our DNA. What we do is we try to improve our quality of life. That's what we do. We're just wired to do that. So if you think about how we're going to live in 100 years from now, the difference between that and now will be bigger than the difference between now and 150 years ago. And 150 years ago, someone who was born in 1890, their mode of transport, the best mode of transport was to be towed by a horse. And when they were 60 or 70 years old, they would fly in a plane. That difference is going to be small in comparison to the difference that we're going to see. So when you think about what we've just talked about with the abundance of expertise, you may think, wow, that means that, what are we going to be doing? What are companies going to be doing? Believe me, we're going to find things to do,
Yeah.
and it's going to be great things.
Yeah. Bobby, I just want to say first, thank you again for coming to our conference, but also for the collaboration. It's been fun to work with you and John and Yang to do the paper. We'll link the paper to you guys so you have it available. Please read, please share, put it on LinkedIn, all those kind of fun
Thanks,
things.
Karim.
Thank you
Been a
so much.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.